Welcome, everyone, to the virtual world of the Eastside Freedom Library. We have a very special event today. We are exhibiting part of Carolyn Olson's work, the Essential Worker Portrait Series, and want to invite everyone to come by the Eastside Freedom Library to have a look at the work. It's great to see it in the book that Carolyn has self-published. It's great to see it online, but it's better to see it in person. And so I want to encourage you to come and see the work. The work will be up until the first weekend in December. So encourage you to come on in and have a look. We do have a stack of the books if you're interested in purchasing one. I was very excited by Carolyn's work when I became aware of it. As a labor historian and labor educator, one of my mantras has been that we live in a society in which work and workers are typically rendered invisible, and it's hard to develop an appreciation for, an understanding of, empathy and solidarity with other workers if we don't understand the work that they're doing and we don't see them doing this work. So I was very excited to discover that Carolyn had this project going. There are now 100 pastels that she has painted, and they are gorgeous and eye-opening. And mind-opening. And it occurred to us at the Eastside Freedom Library that it would be a really great thing to do to have some of the workers whose work is depicted in Carolyn's work come together in a panel, talk about what they thought about being represented this way, and also what they have actually experienced during the pandemic. So our plan is Carolyn is going to share some of her images with us and say a little bit about her motivation for the project. And then we will hear from eight people who are with us this afternoon who will comment on the art and talk a little bit about their work. If you are in the audience, I want to encourage you to use the chat to pose questions. And my colleague Clarence and I will try to track your questions and share them with the panelists. We are recording this event, and the recording will end up on the Eastside Freedom Library's YouTube page. So that others can see this and enjoy this. So let me walk through who everybody is. No, I'll do it before you speak. Okay, we are enabling live transcription. Very good. So I'm going to introduce Carolyn, and then I'll introduce people one at a time as we come to them. So Carolyn Olson is a narrative artist working and living in northern Minnesota. She uses gouache, oil, or pastel and depicts everyday life stories in her work. Her figures are intentionally exaggerated, and the gestures in those figures are emotive. She recently retired from teaching K-12 art for over 30 years, and she continues working in her studio and has completed this remarkable series of essential worker portraits. So Carolyn, if you want to share your screen and say a little bit about the images, that would be great.
Great, let me get this up here. Thank you, Peter, for introducing me. Again, I'm really happy to be here with you all to talk about what's going on in the world as far as how we treat our workers. As an artist, I'm also a mom, and I have had 2 kids that both worked as essential workers in Minneapolis. So when this all started, as an artist, I was struggling with what was important for me to be drawing. All I could think about was how were my kids doing, which is what most of us were struggling with. So I just started drawing my family, people I saw outside my window working. I watched TV, I read stories, internet, what kind of needs do people have? From having a plumber to come in and work, you still had your kid, here's your kid is still there, your family is in the house, the worker comes in, doesn't know if it's a safe place to be. And the hospitals, we heard so many stories about hospitals were still flying full steam ahead, treating everyone they possibly could treat and doing the heavy lifting. And I guess at the beginning, I had hoped that because of the struggle that we were sharing as a society, we would come up with better ways to do our work as hospitals, as repair people, as drivers, bus drivers, people working in transit, people working in grocery stores. And I haven't seen much change. I think the conversations about who we are and what we do, it still seems to be, if I can get it for cheaper, I'll get it. And it's not about the people that are working, doing the hard work. Schools was a big thing for me. I taught in rural northern Minnesota, and some kids were on the bus for an hour and a half, one direction. In the cities, I know the kids are still on the buses for a long time. First person they see is that bus driver. They set the tone for the whole day. They get paid very little. They have pretty rough hours. Here, the first thing that I was hearing was when the kids got there, they get their temperature taken, and then they go into the school. I mean, this is before they even get a good morning. Teachers still, just like workers at the early times, we didn't know what they touched. We didn't know if it was on their clothes. You didn't know if it's in there. We didn't know. So the distancing was so unusual for kids as well, because schools were crammed together, which is always feels better and safer. But so schools was a big issue for me. I would draw specifically because one of my kids is also a teacher in Minneapolis. So I was thinking of him as much. Grocery store, my daughter worked as a cashier. That was the first drawing I did. And we talked all the time trying to figure out what was going on. Here, taking care of family, we bringing in groceries to my mother, kids, like, still the rules of distancing, we don't know. But as a family, we got to figure out how to take care of each other. So leaving things outside the door is impossible when you've got someone who's with a walker, so what could we do as a society? Oops, wrong one. Maintenance people, laundry people, folks that clean up after everyone, especially at the time when we didn't know what was going on. What are you cleaning? What are you touching? Things still needed to be cleaned up. It just seemed like these folks were at highest risk, especially when we didn't know what was it. Was it on the ground? Was it in the air? But I typically drew people that were face to face. I wanted to show the workers, like bus drivers, you're face to face with people all the time. Here, I know maintenance people often worked at night, but I feel like they were cleaning up all of our garbage, everything, and we didn't know what we were leaving. Of course, nurses, medical people, again, the work had to be done. The attitude among medical people was, we do our job. But I don't think we have taken care of medical people like we should have. My impression, and I will stand by this, is medical people aren't complainers. They just do the work. And my mother was a nurse. She showed up neighbor was a nurse. She showed up snowstorms. They'd go to work on snow, snow machines. There's no roads plowed. Here, should point out, I always put gloves on the workers here for a while. Masks were something we were learning about too. And, but I always had people in gloves and masks. And often the masks are those ones we sewed because we couldn't afford the expensive ones. And everybody just had to be masked. But I did want to talk about the meat packing plants, the egg packing plants, the situations because of consumerism, because we like the things and need the things, and that system is already in place where you process. People took huge risks going to work, needing the work, hourly wages, minimum wages, but the huge, I don't know what kind of protective gear was provided, and a lot of times it was minimal and people got sick and died. So I don't know if we recognize how much they offered. So a lot of things just happened outside as I remember things. I still see it. I'm outside more when I see people than inside. But finding the stuff to do at home, especially when we're stuck, finding people, trying to keep people in work who could do the work, but keep our families safe.
So Carolyn, can you share your screen and show us some images?
I thought I did. Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
You haven't seen any of these as I'm talking away, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's see. Sorry. Okay. Can you, okay, so now I'm gonna see if I can get it up there now. You see a messed up screen right now, probably.
We're still all the mug shots.
Really? Why won't it share?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
No, that's great.
You couldn't break into my talking. Okay. There we go. Okay. So this is, you've seen these. Here's the plumber. I'll just get through these quickly. But I did try and include, we're stuck at home. Everybody's at home. You got your kids. You've got medical workers. I like to pack things into compositions. Here's my secretaries, medical secretaries. These are not well-paid people. I mean, they make money, but the risks that we're asking people to accept. And like I said, the face-to-face workers was kind of my priority. Bus drivers, the school was a big deal, just partially because of the teacher. I was curious how things were going. Some schools did this, some schools did not. And it looked political, pretending it's not happening versus it's happening. But my son would say if they test the kids and they get off the bus and they're sick, the whole bus could go home in Minneapolis, because what are you going to do? You don't know who's sick. Drivers driving. And here's my mom trying to get her supplies. Here's the maintenance worker. I drew the laundry at the hospital early on just because I couldn't imagine. I know how hard that work is, and I know how well they're cared for. The maintenance and the laundry people cleaning up all of the illness and trying to keep us well, so we didn't know. Trying to catch it. Heard me talking about all these. We can get to. This is my daughter at the grocery store. Okay, so the images of people getting vaccinated. I was very anxious about everyone getting vaccinated, and I didn't see it happening. So I started making suggestions. You could do this. You can go in the back room at the grocery store and give her a vaccination, and she'll probably go back to work. I mean, I wanted the conversation. I wanted to make it happen. And when it did happen, she cried. She was late April, early May when she got her vaccination. And that was late, as far as I was concerned, because groceries were packed. Grocery stores were packed full of people. They didn't start counting people till later, I don't think. So we did a lot of our food trying to support small businesses, as you probably did too, food trucks and takeout. But showing still people are separating themselves. You're with family if you're standing in line close. Parents are often holding their child, and everyone's wearing gloves, even though they weren't wearing gloves probably at this time. But all right. Thank you. I'm sorry for my
No, that's great. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. So now we're going to hear from our panelists, and I've asked them to prepare a little something about what the art says to them, and also to share a little bit with us about what their jobs were like during the pandemic. So we want to start with Judy. Have we lost Judy? We seem to have lost Judy.
Yeah.
Maybe she will bounce back. But that means, Mary Turner, you got the next short straw. Let me introduce Mary, who is a registered nurse and was elected president of the Minnesota Nurses Association in 2015. She's an ICU nurse at North Memorial Medical Center in Robbinsdale and worked previously at Abbott Northwestern in Minneapolis. During the pandemic, Mary worked in the COVID ICU unit at North Memorial. And in 2021, she was selected by President Biden to serve as the only frontline healthcare worker on his COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force. So, Mary, share some with us about how you feel about this art and what you and your members have been going through during the pandemic.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm going to say that looking at this artwork, it brings on a bit of PTSD, which is understandable when I think of that very first night, the last weekend in February of 2020, when I went on to the night shift that Friday night, and all the young nurses came running up to me going, Mary, is it true we only get one N95 to wear till it disintegrates off our face? And I remember looking around the floor. We have a 13-bed unit, and every single one of the rooms was already in isolation. And I remember looking down at my mask, my one N95, that technically you wear once when you go into a room and then you throw it in the garbage. And I remember Nurse Blair with fear in her eyes saying, how can we safely go home to our babies in the morning? I will never forget that night. And the reason I always bring it up is because those kind of conversations were happening everywhere, on all the floors. Our hospital was one of, we're level 1 trauma, where all 4 of our ICUs were COVID. We had 3 full med surg floors that were nothing but COVID. And we were maybe eventually, about a few weeks later, we were able to have 4 masks that we would alternate. But when I looked at these pictures, the first thing that came to my mind was that these were the people I took care of. All these essential workers, these were my patients, and many of them didn't survive. And I always say that at least I had one N95. My son, who's a grocery worker, he had a cloth mask, but people didn't even wear it up until then. And then you have to realize that at the very beginning, we were walking into the unknown. Nobody knew what COVID would do to you, how it would hit first it was the respiratory, and then we found out it was the circulatory system. And then it was the kidneys that would go. And then I remember the month that we figured out that it hit the brain, that it caused neurological damage. And that, to me, because I'm a beginning the neuro nurse, that that beginning for me was really a shocker, that this was not the flu. And I was on the news quite a bit, trying to get the word out, just like Carolyn was through her art, trying to get out the word out to what this was. And people would say, oh, it's just like the flu. No, the flu doesn't give you brain damage. But anyway, and then another picture that really hit me was, because we could have 13 people and 2/3 of the floor could die in a weekend. And I remember being on one of those nights as a charge nurse where I had somebody die at the beginning of the shift and one at the end of the shift. To have 2 or 3 deaths a shift was nothing unusual. And I remembered there's one picture there that I went down with the body to the refrigerated semi, just to help bring it down there. And there's a picture that Carolyn drew of that refrigerated semi morgue. And we had one of those parked out back at North Memorial. So, like I said, these pictures bring on a lot of PTSD. But the one thing about I will say about the Biden task force is that I was on the healthcare access and then the structural drivers. And we came up, and I was also on the state COVID task force. And this is where we tried to come up with solutions about how to get those vaccines out, et cetera, and what we needed to do in society to make it better and healthier. And my son, I just found out this morning that some of the more out there, Native American reservations, he cited one in Alaska that for the first time is getting electricity. And that is something that we came up with as a suggestion in Biden's that went right to the president, was that what we needed to do, what the things that we needed to change to make everyone healthier. And so I was very proud to be on that.
Thank you. Mary, thank you very much for sharing this with us. So we're going to cycle through the panelists, and then hopefully audience members or panelists will have questions for each other. Judy Jackson, are you there?
I am here. I am
All right.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great that you're here. So our next speaker is Judy Jackson, who has worked for Metro Transit for more than 20 years. She describes herself as a mother and a grandmother, originally from Chicago, but moved to Minnesota 30 years ago. Did lots of things before she began driving for transit. And we're thrilled that she's going to share some of her thoughts and experience with us. Judy,
Hi, guys.
please.
Thank you for having me. Well, like you said, I am a Metro Transit bus operator that I've been driving for over 20 years. And I just want to say, when we first became aware of COVID, I remember seeing on the news this one particular driver. I think he was in New Jersey, and I think he was actually on Facebook, and he was saying what was going on there and how people were coughing, and this one lady was coughing over him, and he became seriously ill. And then I think he was maybe one of the first transit operators in the country to die. And family members start calling me and like, I'm not a big Facebooker, and they start calling me like, did you hear about this or did you see that? And at the beginning, we weren't paying much attention to it, but when they called me and told me about this story, of course I started paying attention, and then I was like, well, wow. And then it started hitting the news, and they were talking about it, and I started wearing a cloth mask. I had a coworker who was wearing a mask, and he was like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. But so we were pretty much, in my garage, I know for sure, one of the first to wear a mask. And then it kind of just gradually started catching on. And people were looking at us as we were driving buses, and you pull up to them and they'd get this weird look on their face like, what she got that on for? And eventually, as the news got out that we were dealing with this pandemic, more and more people started wearing them, and then transit made it pretty much mandatory for us, but it was just for us, not the customers. And, we were like, well, why can't, they should be wearing them too. Eventually they got to where they were wearing them. And I was, we didn't know, like I said earlier, whether this was on our clothes, in our uniforms, or what it was going to do to us. So I live in a home with my mom, who's elderly, who's ill and has a lot of health issues. And my grandson was doing school here. So I would come home and immediately take my uniform off and wash them, clothes, shower, everything, because we didn't know if we were bringing this stuff home and going to the grocery stores. You were scared to buy this, and it was just a scary time for everybody. I still today wear a mask because you just don't know. A lot of people say, oh, it's over, you shouldn't wear it anymore, you don't need to wear that. But for me, I think I'll wear it when I work. I'm pretty comfortable being without it, but when I work, since we're in such an enclosed environment, buses aren't that big. It's air circulation on the buses. Some buses, some of the windows on the newer buses don't open. So you're breathing recirculated air. The doors does open, periodically throughout the day, but it's just as a safety for me. I just prefer to still wear my mask when I work.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for sharing that with us. Next, we're going to hear from Joan Duncanson. Joan recently retired after teaching special ed in St. Paul for 21 years. And she's also currently providing homebound services for a special ed student and tutoring another student in math. So, Joan, want to share some with us about your experiences, please?
Yes, thank you for having me. When I looked at those pictures, I was immediately drawn to the color and the positivity about the bright colors. And that kind of is indicative of people who are essential workers, that they always try to think on the bright and the positive side, but yet the demeanor of the people in the pictures was very subdued. And the word that came to mind was persevere, that we all had to persevere, but we had important jobs to do that people depended on us for. And I as a teacher, I probably had it easier than most essential workers. We were right in the middle of a very important contract negotiations when they closed the schools. And thank goodness we were able to get our settlement before schools closed, or I don't know for sure what would have happened. But one day I was a teacher and the next day I'm at home and I teach special ed, and my students are all severely cognitively impaired, and they are tactile learners. So my job was to try to figure out how I could work with tactile learners in a situation like this. So it was a very large learning curve. I am so thankful for the technology that became available to us that we never had before. But Zoom meetings are difficult, but all of the teachers talked back and forth and, hey, this is working for me, or this isn't working for me. What are you doing for this? And that helped a lot. But the special ed kids, a lot of the kids that are in special education really suffered because of that lack of personal touch. And I'm sure that happens in especially in the nursing too, that personal touch wasn't there. And so it was hard on the children, and they need more support for learning than they have at home. And I'm not talking about just somebody being there. Quite often it's holding that iPad so that doesn't go across the room, or, helping them navigate the iPad when many of our families have never even learned how to use an iPad or get on a Zoom meeting. So there were some real challenges that spring, but it was very I am appreciative of the technology that was there, but then again, that just made my work days longer because I had more prep work to do. And then in the fall, we came back in a hybrid situation because that was the directive of the district is we've got to get the children with special needs back in school so that they can continue to learn. So they're, and I understand that. And it was scary. We didn't know. We knew that a lot of our families had multi-generations in the same house. And I have to say that my colleagues were very cooperative in wearing masks and getting the vaccinations. That would have just been very difficult if we would have had problems with that. And then by winter, we were back full time, but not full time in the sense that my class was much smaller. I only had 4 to 6 students instead of 8. And 8 students, I would have not been able to distance in my classroom because my classroom was so small. So it worked out. And I had it easy because we were able to have homebound instructors that took care of the students who were not in school. Many of my colleagues in the district had to do online instruction and in-person instruction at the same time. And I know that was extremely difficult. And at the same time, we all had the same paperwork expectations and the same procedures to go through for gaining tenure and that was probably one of the most difficult because all of a sudden what we were being evaluated on was upside down and people were being evaluated and we really didn't know what they were being evaluated, what we were being evaluated on. But the picture that really grabbed my heart was the one with the family on one side of the window and the parent or grandparent in the nursing home on the other side, because that's what we went through with my mother. She was in the nursing home and my brother would send me pictures of her with her ear against the window so she could hear him. And that was difficult for her, but then eventually I was able to be on a Zoom call with her. And I'm so appreciative of the people that would work within my schedule so that my mom could see me on a Zoom call on a telephone. She eventually did get COVID and pass away, which was really, really sad. That's the thing that was really scary at the beginning is when the nursing homes had such high levels of death that was very scary. And they did such a wonderful job in her nursing home for 6 months. But finally, by last October of 2019, she did contract COVID. She didn't have a lot of the symptoms, but with, like you say, the neurological part, she had dementia, and that accelerated her dementia that she passed within 60 days. And that was really sad. And it was scary going to see her then because of all the plastic that was up. And it felt like a war zone. School was actually my happy place because that was someplace that I knew that everything was going to be okay. But then again, my students were very immunocompromised. And generally, just in a normal school year, we lose 1 or 2 students out of a population of 140, just because they were never meant to live that long. And so that was my biggest fear, is that one of our students would get COVID. And we worked very hard to make sure that they didn't. And I communicated with my families on a daily basis. Yep, I'm wiping the desks down right now. And, the guy's going to come in and spray the school. And many of our students, in fact, the vast majority, are not able to wear a mask for a variety of reasons. So we worked our best to keep our kids healthy. And we came through, and I think we learned a lot, but I think it was very, very hard. And that's indicative of the lack of teachers right now, is that was kind of the thing that broke a lot of people's desire and will to keep doing it.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you for sharing this with us. Our next speaker is Leslie Kaup. Leslie has worked as a cook in a hospital in southern Minnesota for 8 years and is an active member of SEIU Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa. And Leslie's also been a student at the New Brookwood Labor College and an active haiku poetry writer. So Leslie, please.
Thanks, Peter. So in keeping with the fact that I'm a writer, I'm actually going to read a few passages of my journal from the early days of working through COVID, just to kind of give a sense of where my brain was at the time. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what Carolyn's work means to me. March 19th, this is 2020. Every day when I let myself into the side door of the hospital with my key card and walk through the echoing tunnel to get to the kitchen, I think, is this the day when no one else shows up? When the news comes out while I'm walking through the tunnel to shelter in place? And I've already prepared bacon and hash browns and 2 kinds of sausages and scrambled eggs and biscuits and gravy, and no one comes to eat it. March 22nd. I wonder when I will see my family. I thought about visiting them during my 4 days off, but of course I can't. What if I'm already infected and I take that into their home? My parents are in their 70s. My niece is immunocompromised. My sister works in a nursing home. It would have been a terribly irresponsible thing to do, and yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. March 25th. I was issued a thermometer at work today with instructions to take my temp before and after work every day, and if it's above 100.4 to report it and not come into work. And good thing I have that essential employee letter that my manager gave me, because while I was at work today, the word was that Waltz would be announcing a shelter in place at 2 p.m. I got home, undressed at the back door, shoved my uniform into the washing machine, jumped in the shower, started watching his press conference at 2:05. Not quite shelter in place, more Minnesotan, like pretty please stay home. And the liquor stores are allowed to stay open, which seems to be the main concern at work today. April 3rd. A moment. I think the number in Minnesota is over 700 cases now, and 7 in our county. I wonder how many of those are in the building I work in. The rest of the hospital is masked up. So far, just the front of house in dietary. Our company is pretty sure that we won't be able to stop touching our faces and then touching the food. Who do they think we are? We always wash our hands after touching our faces. We are trained. We are smart. Who are they? How dare they? Just one more here. Today I read in the news, like in the media, confirmation that the treatment center has COVID-19 positive patients, the building I work in. I read this in the news. Instead of hearing it from my employer, from the owner of the facility I work in, confirmations of the whispers in the hallway, the rumors from housekeepers and janitors and managers who say they can't be quoted. And I hear it in the news instead of from my work. So I work in a hospital. I work as a cook. I didn't have direct patient contact because we don't deliver trays to patients in that sense. We don't have like a medical surgical unit. We have a psychiatric unit and we have a treatment center unit. And those are kind of delivered en masse by one person. We would just leave a cart in the hallway and then the nurse would come out and get it. And then we would kind of exchange it that way. The hardest thing was my coworkers and vendors coming into the building who didn't take anything seriously, who would have the mask, below their nose, if they wore one at all. Delivery drivers, plumbers, electricians who came into the kitchen, they thought it was a big joke. And this was in the early days when we didn't know what was going to happen, who was going to get sick, how it was transmitted, things like that. So looking through these pictures, the ones that I see myself in most are the hospital workers, of course, the food preparation workers, the protesters and the voters. I feel really strongly that I'm in those pictures. But I also see myself as a farm worker. I see myself as a greenhouse worker because those are things I've done in the past. my favorites visually were definitely the farm and the greenhouse workers because of the color and the greenery, right? Everything in our world right then at the beginning of the pandemic was gray. It was spring, it was the end of winter, everything was filthy, right? There's gray snow everywhere, there's gray skies. I wear gray uniforms at work. We were in gray moods. And so color, but color in these is amazing. It seems like it's like it brightens everything to see ourselves represented in such a colorful way. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Sadie Brewer. Sadie is a registered nurse at Planned Parenthood in St. Paul, where she and 400 other workers recently voted to form a union with SEIU. When she's not fighting for reproductive and workers' rights, Sadie can be found at home either working on a random craft project or curled up on the couch watching movies with her partner and their 2 cats. So, Sadie, thank you for tearing yourself away from that scene to share. And also thank you for organizing at Planned Parenthood. And in the midst of all of this pandemic, some of the brightest moments are the stories of workers organizing at Half Price Books or Starbucks or Trader Joe's or Planned Parenthood. So please share something with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really powerful to be able to do that and have that motivation through everything else going on in the world, particularly with surrounding reproductive rights. So having our union to work on has been amazing. So looking through Carolyn's work, what really struck me were the faces and the absence of faces and everyone in their masks and how normalized that's become and how, you know, as humans, we're trained to recognize each other's faces and it's become normal for us to not anymore. Despite not being able to see the entire face, you can tell everyone in this artwork is fearful, apprehensive, uncertain, particularly the person peeking around the corner in the image of the plumber, just like there's someone in my home, am I going to get sick? Just that constant uncertainty this entire time. And I just feel this entire pandemic and particularly masking, it's all put up such a barrier between myself and my patients and my work, taking away that personal touch as a nurse, which is so important to me. I'm incredibly grateful that my patient population that I work with is mostly healthy young adults. So my risk for transmission was pretty low. But it was still just kind of nothing really changed for us. People were still coming in to receive care. We couldn't pause anything, reduce numbers, anything like that. We did reduce like guests coming in with patients, which was really hurtful for them and was just kind of another barrier because they're going through this really difficult appointment, this difficult time in their life, and they have to do it alone. So I felt myself becoming even more that person for them to lean on. And I think that I felt like myself and my patients, we were leaning on each other through this time. I was stuck at home when I wasn't at work. I wasn't able to see my own family. I wasn't able to see my community, but I still had to go to work and be with them. And so I think I took that as some way to get human interaction and understanding and be able to share that with someone else. And I thought that was really powerful. But yeah, through the pandemic, not much really changed as far as my work. I, again, am very grateful. We had PPE available to us throughout the whole thing. There have been strange shortages that have reduced our ability to give people all of their services. Weirdly, we've run out of condoms a lot, which has been interesting through the pandemic. But I am lucky to have not been too impacted as far as my ability to perform care and my patients receiving care. They've still been able to come in and get the services that they need.
So Sadie, if I could, let me just push you a little bit. Can you say a little bit about the role that the pandemic played in the choice that you and your fellow workers at Planned Parenthood made to organize a union?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there has always been kind of this urge to come together, unionize, get some sort of backup for workers at Planned Parenthood, but the pandemic really kind of pushed that further. Just things that have come up throughout, like for instance, in 2020, they withheld raises from employees just because we didn't have the money for it, but our CEO still received an 8% raise during that year. So just things like that coming up were really just to instigate us to come together and get some sort of protection to allow us to continue providing care and keep reproductive access wide and open. So SEIU has really provided that. It's really fantastic. We have unionized across 5 states. So Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska.
Wow.
And we did all of that in under a year. We kept it secret. We made everyone aware of it, 400 plus people, all in under a year, because we all knew that we needed this so badly.
Wow, that's inspiring. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
you.
Great. And next we're going to hear from Amy Steger. And I've gotten to know Amy through her work as a journalist, a recent graduate from the University of Minnesota who immediately has slid into work with what used to be called Workday Minnesota, now called Workday Magazine. And Amy did a great interview with Carolyn a little ways back. And we're big fans of her work at the Eastside Freedom Library. And I was excited to be able to invite Amy to join us for this conversation today. So Amy, talk to us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I kind of want to do the same thing that Leslie did and read a quote. I'll explain why after. The shrieks of women and children at the windows and doors of their houses, where their dearest relations were perhaps dying or just dead, were so frequent to be heard as we passed the streets that it was enough to pierce the stoutest heart in the world to hear them. Tears and lamentations were seen almost in every house, especially in the first part of the visitation, for towards the latter end men's hearts were hardened, and death was so always before their eyes that they did not so much concern themselves for the loss of their friends, expecting that themselves should be summoned the next hour. So like Peter said, I went to the U of M, and in January of 2020, I actually took part in a literary nonfiction class at the school that I went to. The first book we read was Daniel Defoe's Journal of a Plague Year, a fictionalized account inspired by true events that happened during the bubonic plague. Little did we know, we entered our very own plague year. That spring break, we left class and did not return in person. I began sheltering at home with my family. And I decided to write about them for a literary exercise. They were all essential workers. My mom is still a lunch lady at the high school I went to. My dad was working at Home Depot. My brother was a grocery store worker, and my sister worked in childcare and in essential retail. I also worked as a barista at a coffee shop and didn't return to work until that May. And a lot of stuff changed with food service there, but we actually did get record profits that year and in 2021 because a bunch of new apartment complexes had just been built nearby and everyone was desperate for treats and someone to talk to. And so in the summer of 2020, I saw an opening for an internship with what was called Workday Minnesota. And I decided to apply. It made me think about how my family was a working family and I wanted to explore that and learn more. And so since then, it's kind of been a journey reporting on essential workers and stuff like frontline worker pay and exploring different types of media and representation for working people. I made a podcast about my family and I'm working on stories today about working people finding power through struggle and solidarity and loss and grief, but also joy and hope. I spent the first and a half year of the pandemic worrying about my family and worrying that they'd get sick. They all did at different times and all recovered, but it was a different story for my dad. This Thanksgiving actually marks 1 year since I got to actually physically be with him. He was sick and had a really bad cough. and tested positive for COVID. And then a few weeks later, on December 11th, he passed away in the hospital. There was one nurse who stayed with him the whole time, and I'm forever grateful for her care. And I will never forget the tears and lamentations that filled my days and sometimes still do. And so I learned about Carolyn's book this summer because of an email Peter sent out. I was so intrigued by her story as a teacher and a mother of essential workers in my community, and how making this art actually helped her cope through such a difficult time. And I was excited for all of the conversations that can come out of art like this. When I first saw her portraits, I was overwhelmed with grief and love and appreciation. To me, these paintings are a documentation of the care that one feels for a family and for a community. And to see school food service workers like my mom represented meant so much to me. And then to also see different kinds of independent media represented as well meant a lot too. I actually got to see the portraits in Duluth at the Proof Gallery, and I got to interview Carolyn about her work and wrote my own review of it that I can share with everyone. But this body of work is such a sacred thing to me, and I thank you all for sharing your stories, and I love to hear all your interpretations of it. So thanks.
Amy, thank you. Thank you for this, and thank you for your work with Workday. And it's so inspiring to meet someone as young as you are, committed to this work and having an impact. And thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Eric Imler. Eric is a psychiatric associate at the University of Minnesota Medical Center. And he too is part of a newly organized union unit. So Eric, want to share some of your thinking with us, please?
Thank you, guys. I first maybe want to apologize if I get tearful during this. I already noticed myself doing that when some of you were speaking. I have been told by my therapist that they believe I do have some PTSD, and I think related to events of the last 2.5, 3 years. And I'm trying to not let it harden me too much. So, but thank you for making this space. And this brings me to just kind of the process of when I was looking through the installation that Carolyn put together, that I had to do it in breaks, but also I think there's some, beautiful healing that may come from it, but brought up a lot and memories that I hadn't thought about since 2020. Yeah, I think it was overwhelming and also really important for not only me, but I feel like my coworkers who have not been in the spotlight quite as much are seeing the importance of their work, like our environmental service staff who were also in there when our managers had gone home and our higher ups had gone home, and some of our doctors weren't even on site. It was us nurses, our EVS staff, and not a lot of people talking about it. I think it also made me also think about, because I work in an inpatient mental health facility, a lot of the people who would come in for help, who needed support, would kind of basically, if you come to our units, you're either not able to keep yourself safe, you're struggling to take care of yourself, or you may want to hurt someone else. And I think it gave me and reminded me of the context of what in part brought people to us during that time. And just like a sadness too about how we all, when we wanted and needed to be on our A game, I think we did the best we could, and also couldn't provide the support that their families could have provided when they're in our units, because we were restricted on visitors. We had patients who had lost both their parents, and there weren't even 20 yet, and just not knowing how to support them. and feeling like, I mean, I'd been doing this work for about 5 years prior to then, feeling pretty good in my skills, but just feeling stretched again and again. And while there's like this feeling of helplessness in these really intense situations, I think there's also a lot of beauty that came up. I mean, in terms of how my coworkers and we all work together to try to look after each other and our patients. In our settings, sometimes our patients are very confused, have very poor boundaries, and we have a communal setting, and we can't restrict people to their rooms. So we would pull together to try to figure out in the early days how to get masks to our especially vulnerable patients who were immunocompromised, who were on a unit where there's someone with COVID and we couldn't send them over to the medical unit because they were just overwhelmed. And we would pool our resources together to give each other N95 masks, ask through our families to pull them out of their work sheds, and to help each other out. And I think from this sort of work together, our work towards unionizing built, and eventually we unionized about 350 mental health workers. And I think that positive collaboration is something that I thought about in these pieces, along with the heaviness and the perseverance and the hardening that I picture when I saw this installation. And I guess something else I thought about is like, when I would leave the hospital, it used to feel like before the pandemic, I could leave behind the stress and the instability of work, but it was there for all of us when we would go to the grocery store or get on the bus. Folks were having to go through their own struggle. And in some ways, I'm kind of feeling like this feeling of like being underwater and struggling to like get out of that. So it's just these waves of feelings of both gratitude for the people who I was able to like be alongside through such a really difficult experience, and also like deep sadness because of the people who we would watch die, because we would go to the medical parts of our hospital and we'd work in the ERs, and we'd have people in our ambulance bays not getting adequate care and also being confused about the care that they needed. And also the beauty and how we tried to make it a little less painful for them. But I just struggle to make sense of it. But I think this installation has really been I think an important step with my own processing, because there's just stuff I'm not thinking about that this brought up for me. I do also want to say this made me think about someone close to my partner, who's in my partner's family, who's a nurse, a COVID nurse, over in Colorado, and was there from the early days, and reminding me of some of the people we looked after and the essential workers we looked after. Unfortunately, he took his own life during the pandemic. And yeah, and it's, all of this is just so complicated, but also is something like I don't want to forget, and I don't want to keep below and harden to. So I just am so grateful for this installation, the group of workers, and the visibility that Carolyn's work is doing. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much. Last, we're going to hear from Devana Love. And Devana was born and raised in the Powderhorn community in South Minneapolis. She says along East 38th Street and Chicago Avenue, which we all know as George Floyd Square. and forever will be George Floyd Square. Devana began her career at Metro Transit as a bus operator in 2001 and drove a bus for approximately 7 years. But she is now a mechanic's helper in the maintenance department and is attending a mechanic's apprenticeship program to become a mechanic technician. So Devana, like Judy, whom we heard from earlier, is a member of Amalgamated Transit Local 1005, and she's vice president of the local's Black Caucus and the Amalgamated Transit 1005 action team. So, Devana.
Hello,
Good. Yeah.
I'm happy to be here and enjoyed all the stories that I've heard thus far. I too have a disabled sister, and my mother lives with me. So when I seen the artwork, it just kind of flushed back a lot of memories. My main concern was them. I didn't want to bring anything to them, because they both have respiratory issues and all these things. So that was my main thing. And I'm back there on the buses. And so you're wondering when the bus pulls in. There was one piece of art where they were cleaning, and that kind of came back to me because we used to disinfect the buses, but then you're thinking to yourself, I'm cleaning these buses, but what am I, you was hearing things about metal, and there's a lot of metal on the buses. So there was a lot of feelings going on, but the positive part that I got from the artwork was how I felt like all of us was part of a body, that we all played an important part in getting through, we're still kind of going through it, but the pandemic. I looked at the grocery store worker differently. I looked at, just little things that you take for granted. I was looking at them in a whole new light. These people are risking their lives to come and help. And I mean, we did it too. I looked at the bus operator, the nurses, so many people, it just made me feel like if it wasn't for this person or if it wasn't for that person. So I just felt like we were part of a body, and we all need, you need your hand, you need your foot, you need, things to go on in life. It was kind of unsettling that one of the greatest countries in the world was, really didn't know what was going on either. That was kind of unsettling to me. I've never seen America in that state in my time, where, you got one person on this news station saying this, and you got another person on another news station saying that. I finally had to stop watching the news because for my mental sanity, going to work was another struggle. You got people who were saying it's not real. Oh, it's the flu. Oh, the only people that are going to die from it who already have just a lot of people that were not very compassionate, and we did have people at our job die. And so, it was a lot. It was a lot. And so the artwork brought some of them feelings back. It was a tough time. And my mother ended up with it, and she has a lot of respiratory issues, but luckily, she didn't even know she had it. She was like, oh, I just got this little cough. And I'm like, no, you have COVID. And so luckily she came through that. But the artwork was beautiful. I think it was a wonderful depiction of everything that everybody lived through and continues to live through.
Thank you, Devana. Thank you so much. Carolyn, if you would like to respond to what you've heard, we'd love to hear from you again, please. You're muted, though.
My skills aren't the greatest. I'm just overwhelmed by your stories. The fact that I could be part of this with you. And I think, you know, to say that we're in this together, that's a hopeful thing. At a time when we didn't know who to trust, it seemed like you're saying, like I hear, we had conflicting stories. I too wear masks everywhere. It's like my go-to gift for my kids still, and their families are a pack of masks. But I guess the shared awareness we all experience, even now when I walk into the exhibition, seeing all of the images, it's a lot to take in. All these people did this for us. All these people are still doing this for us. And then the reality of what is our society decided for systemic changes to make their life better. And I'm grateful to see more unions coming up to take care of workers. We still need to manage all that, and you all speak to that. What you went through, it's almost unimaginable what you were asked to do and still are being asked to do. But I think if we can keep our voices strong and keep the conversations going, people will hear you, and maybe the changes will come to better our society. That's my hope. It's the only thing I as an artist feel that's my job, to be visually articulate. So, but, and Judy, I was going to tell you that bus driver story, that's what inspired me to draw the bus driver. And that very story, I listened to his wife talking about it. And the bus company, I worked at the bus company here in Duluth for a long time. And my boss came in, he said, I've never seen anybody consider the importance of the bus drivers. It's just one of those things we expect to happen. We don't expect people to get your floors clean for you. It just happens. So all of this invisibility is maybe it will be appreciated more. And if not, we still will do it. That's the kind of people you are. I know that. So I wish the best for you, and I thank you for your insights. I am forever changed by your stories, and I hope that you know I believe you. So thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you so much. Mary Turner, you've raised your mechanical paw, but you're muted.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Carolyn, I wanted to address something that you had said before we all started, and you said that you would hope that the pandemic would actually bring about better working conditions. But the reality is the working conditions for the working people were bad before the pandemic, and all the pandemic did was to highlight them. And now, unfortunately, what is happening, and I could ask everyone across this whole panel whether it's true, is our employers have gotten used to well, in our world, crisis staffing, crisis charting, crisis staffing, doing more with less, because there were so many shortages. And now they've found out that, oh, we can get more work for less resources, and they're getting used to it and they like it. And it's there was an article, like in hospitals alone, we are down 21% in all departments. 21% of people have left the hospitals that are not being hired back. And this is a problem. And I bet you anything, and every single industry, the schools, everything, they're all thinking that this is just fine. And so that, guys, that's why we have to unionize. The whole world needs to unionize. There isn't one single group. And I don't care who unionizes. I know in healthcare, I don't care who unionizes them, but every single aspect of healthcare has to be unionized. And I would say that for every single industry, because we are up against employers that have gotten used to making a lot of money off of a lot of sorrow from a lot of people.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I would
Carolyn.
agree with. I think greed has overtaken. There's no law in this country for some reason that you can against greed, and it's taking a bigger toll than it should. Union is our only goal here when it comes to how to secure just a good life. We're not looking at excesses. We're looking at quality of living issues. That's how I feel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I work as an organizer. I worked during the beginning of the pandemic. I was working for MAPE, which represents state employees. And so we had a real mix of folks, many office workers who had a different experience, obviously, than those who worked in some of the direct care in prisons and things like that. And I guess my question, because out of that experience, something you said, Leslie, kind of caught my ear. I found that there was a lot of solidarity among workers, especially in the beginning, a real sense of like we got to ask for what we need, asking for the PPE alongside nurses for like the state mental health hospitals, things like that. And then something kind of seemed to shift, and I don't know whether that was the question I have is around the solidarity. Like, how was that like among workers in workplaces? Because I know there's still disagreement about protections, about vaccines, and how did that impact you, in your workplace, and dealing with like all this uncertainty, like within your union or your workforce. Anybody, I'm curious.
Yeah, would anyone like to respond to Caitlin? And there we go. We've got gallery view. What about the close relationships on the job? And
Yeah, Caitlin, this is Mary from the nursing
Yeah.
world. I know that, it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to have that handful that were the anti-vaxxers and things like that. I mean, the day that we got our vaccine, we were like, we had balloons and party and the whole 9 yards. I mean, on our COVID ICU, are you kidding me? But darned if we didn't have a couple that were against it, ones who had worked in it. And all I can say is that, 98% of our people were all for getting the vaccine and things like that. But it also depended where you went. Here was the real crime of it. But I think if you look back in history, every single pandemic had a certain amount of politics involved. But this one had an overabundance of it. And I always say, and here's the one other thing. I think that if we could have the press, and there's the media people here, right? I think if you would have been allowed into those hospitals that very first winter, we would have had a different story. I would try to do news stories and they would always say, Mary, can we get photos? Can we get photos? I said, yeah, and I can get fired. And they didn't get into those hospitals to show what people looked like being on their stomach, intubated until autumn. And by then, the will to all work together was gone. And so it was such a missed opportunity. And it was because the hospitals were like, well, still trying to act like it wasn't there. They're just trying to act like it was, well, it's just the old people, or it's just it was a huge missed opportunity, and then everything went crazy. But I think most of us, I don't know, the other ones I don't know about teachers or what, if you had a handful that weren't, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone else, but a lot of it was geographical, where you live.
Carolyn, did you want to say something, please?
Well, thank you for Mary for what you said. I think overall, it's been a missed opportunity. At first, I agree. There was lots of discussion, and this isn't happening. What can we do? What can we do? My daughter was paid extra money for a period of time, and then they took it back. They said, no, it's over now. So how are you supposed to feel then? And you still get sick, but you don't get paid now for the hourly wage workers when you didn't go in, even though you were as sick as you could have been earlier on. The missed opportunity when everybody had to stop, the hospitals were screaming forward trying to take care of everyone, and the rest of us were supposed to get out of the way and get our work done to make things safer and get us back on track. That was in my head. Such a great opportunity, and we just did not. All of you, it sounds like you all went to work, you all did your part. And I think family members watched your efforts. From my perspective, I would watch people go, and then I would wait until they came home. But
let's see, Amy, you had a question about the frontline worker pay. Why don't you go ahead and say it, and we'll see what people say.
Yeah, I'm curious how many of you on the panel applied for frontline worker pay from the state, and how did that go for you? I have a few friends who tried applying and did not receive it. And so they were either didn't get back to the emails fast enough, or were not eligible for some reasons. And so I'm curious how many of you were eligible and were able to receive it.
Well, this is Judy. I received it and I was eligible.
Devana?
Yes, I received it too. I was eligible.
And I wonder, Judy and Devana, you're both in Amalgamated Transit 1005. Did the union educate members about your eligibility and how to apply?
Yes.
I guess they did, yeah, but when it first came about, it was pretty clear that we should have been eligible for it because of the type of work we do and the people we're dealing with on a daily basis. But then they did mention that we should probably apply. Prior to once we knew that they had that money, another coworker and I went to the Capitol and spoke with a couple of senators at a forum for healthcare workers. I think Mary was there. Yeah, but yeah, we got it. And when she said something about the shortage of workers, transit is short 300 workers. And they've cut lots of routes, but it's still business as usual. You still gotta, get the routes out, get the buses out. And we had, like, I think the nurse Mary was saying also that you had people who were, you don't need to wear the mask. It's just the flu. We went through that too. A lot of dissension between drivers in my garage, at least. Absolutely.
Eric, I wonder if I'm going to ask you. You don't have to answer, but I'll ask. Did you imagine when you became a psychiatric associate that you would get involved in organizing a union? How did that step emerge for you and the people that you work with?
So my first job in the role similar to what I'm in was at Regents Hospital, and they are union. So I was part of a union and I was just a member. I wasn't a steward or part of leadership. And then when I went to Riverside, I saw, even before the pandemic, as like Mary mentioned, that there were some big differences in the respect our role got, the consistency and that we got in terms of our role and what our duties were. And it was actually before a pandemic, a gentleman named Daniel, who was already working on unionizing, who had reached out to me and recruited me. And I think that like personal connection, as well as like him kind of asking about my experience and us kind of forming this collaboration, I think helped me realize how important it was to unionize the workplace. Daniel actually suddenly passed away. He was 39 in September of 2019. And so there was some confusion about who would go forward with this. And some people really close to him, who he had, like, I think, helped cultivate that value and importance in organizing, carried it on, including myself. And I think, as Mary also mentioned, a lot of us mentioned the pandemic kind of brought forward issues that were already there. And it became more, and we saw the difference, even though nurses were getting treated extremely poorly. We were having our benefits taken away during that time, and no one should have their benefits taken away, and we all should have been getting more. But we saw a difference in terms of how nurses could push the employer in some ways. And in some ways, the employer did not listen. But I think that was a strong example to us about what unions can also do, because they did make, in the ways that they could, conditions better for all of us. And so I think that pushed a lot of our coworkers. And when we went to our election, it was about a little over a year ago, we had 98% in support of unionizing. And that was about 350 workers, and not a lot of people all over the aisle in terms of political affiliation. But yeah, I didn't expect to be involved with it. And I think it was both the community that helped me get there, and also circumstances, and also, like, people would come before me who had already made things better, help me appreciate why it was important.
Great, thank you. And I wonder, Sadie, if I could put you on the spot, that at Planned Parenthood, what are the range of occupations that have come together in this SEIU unit? Because you're an RN, but who else is involved?
Right. Yeah. So we were working with MNA at first, because we do have so many nurses that work at PP. But we decided we wanted to work with SEIU instead, so we could encompass everyone that works for Planned Parenthood. So there's registered nurses, social workers, our healthcare associates, which are our front desk workers, medical assistants, our administrative staff, training and development, education and outreach. There are so many groups that are included in this that are going to get protection from SEIU.
Mm-hmm. And what about the relationships between people? Has getting involved together to organize a union brought people closer together across different job categories?
Most certainly. Something that we noticed as we began this process is that we're kind of separated from each other, not only because we work in separate states, but because we're in these separate departments, and half of our workforce is working from home now. Thankfully, working at Planned Parenthood, I feel like it's kind of a different situation. A lot of us are very like-minded, and there's already so much solidarity just because of the work that we're doing. And I think that's part of why it was so easy for us to come together and decide that a union is what's going to be best for us.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And Devana, I've been doing some teaching of apprentices in the electricians union and the pipe fitters union. And I walk into the room, or I zoom into the room, and I look, and very few women. And so what's your journey becoming a mechanic? And what's the solidarity around a woman becoming a mechanic in Metro Transit and in ATU 1005?
I'm just starting, actually, and they are trying to get more women into them roles. We do have, I'd roughly say about 10 to 15 of them. It's something for me. It's an opportunity the company is providing, and our union also fought for. So I give kudos to our union, because they've been fighting long and hard for this opportunity. And basically it's opportunity, and I've been there and I deserve to move up. Most people are okay with it, but there's always that little percentage that
Mhm.
is concerned that I paid for my schooling. You know, it's always something. And then plus it's seniority. So I've been in that department and I get to carry my seniority. So
Mhm. Mhm.
but most people are happy about it. They're opening different programs because the company used to hire from within. And now, excuse me, the last couple of, well, I'll say the last 5 or 10 years, they've been going outside.
Mhm.
And we're trying to keep it inside. You know, we've been here, we've done the work, we have the experience, you know, allow us to move up in the company. And so the union's been fighting to get back to that level with the company. So
Great, great.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yep.
you. Joan, you got something to say, please?
I was just going to say, I was fortunate enough to get the essential worker pay. But my son, who works for a newspaper in their mailroom, putting the papers together, they had to, they were not eligible. And they worked every day, you know, once the shutdown came. And it was just kind of sad that there's some areas that people were not recognized. I'm, you know, and again, it wasn't a lot of money, so I shared my money with
Right.
him. We went out to eat.
Right. Amy, if you've been tracking it, am I right that when the dust settled, it's $470 something, one sum, that's it, done?
Yep. Yeah. And a little over 1 million people received it or were supposed to receive it. And so that's a lot of money there, but also they severely underestimated how many essential workers are in this state. So
Yeah.
they're supposed to come out with the report. So I'll be eagerly
Great.
anticipating that
Great.
report.
Great. Mary Turner, please.
I just, you know, having been on the front line again of the frontline worker, I think I was just like Devonna said, I've been at every news conference I could make and committee after committee after committee. You know, it was so rewarding about it was the solidarity, and that's what I'm getting to, is the solidarity that I know for me as a labor leader who is used to only thinking about the nurses and being surrounded by the transport workers and the food service workers and the meat packers and all these people and SEIU and every single, and the teachers and for what I think our fight was almost 1.5 years, 2 years for that. That was so rewarding, and it just helped me grow so much as a labor leader that I don't just care about the nurses, I care about the workers. And that's what's behind my comment when I say all workers need to unionize.
Yeah.
Because I now care about all workers.
Great. Thank you. Eric, it looked like you wanted to say something, please.
I accidentally put my hand up.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyone else before we close? I want to thank everyone so much for taking time to share with us. I want to thank Carolyn. Carolyn, please go ahead.
The one thing that's come to mind listening to you also is because of this series, I've tried to sort out what is it we need to do. People want to know, what can I do? How do we make the changes? And I've always said, well, who are you voting for? Who are you standing next to? Who are you aligning yourself with? We can do this politely and stand up for each other and point out what needs to happen. So who you vote for. So drawing the voters, drawing the protesters, drawing the election judges, all of those people standing up and doing the part they have to do. But also, loud and clear, union is doing the work that the workers need to survive. it's an easy answer, not that it's an easy thing to do all the time, but I want to thank you all for making this happen, because I don't know that people always hear union people talking. When I was young, they did, but I haven't heard it a long time. So for me, I'm grateful. So thank you so much for your work and what you're doing. But I think people need the specifics. They don't, those overarching, we need change. That means nothing. So specifics, look into unions for your workers. This is what has to happen. So thank you so much.
Carolyn, thank you for giving us a reason to have this conversation today. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us. We will get an edited version up on the YouTube page, and I will send the link to everybody so that you can share it with your mother or your kids or grandkids or whoever you want to see you in a role of speaking on behalf of your experiences and others. Thank you so much. We are not done by a long shot, and I have a suspicion that all of you will continue to carry it on as well. So thank you. Stay well and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.